Alrighty, episode 82 of the Paws Up podcast. Here with my friend and co-host Jake Gibson. Jake, we have a very special guest from FIU Baseball. We have Brian Jeroloman. Very excited to have him on, one of the assistant coaches at FIU. Coach, very excited to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be on, especially for episode 82.
For sure. So, yeah, let's just get it going right away. You've been in this game for a very long time, but I don't think many asked, when did you begin playing baseball and when did you think it was something that you could do competitively?
I started playing baseball when I was a kid, 2 years old. And, my mom and dad my dad's from New York, and basketball is really big up there. But he always knew when me and my brother were kids that we just gravitated toward baseball. Like he played in like some kind of like slow pitch softball or fast pitch softball or something like that. And we would always grab the bat. And we just always had a love for it, even at an early age. And I actually played T-ball illegally when I was 3 years old because I could catch. And you're not allowed to technically start T-ball until you're like 5 and 6. And since I could catch, they let me illegally play T-ball. And so I've been kind of playing forever. And when I knew it was going to be something, you never know how good you are until people kind of tell you how good you are. Like you might think you're good, but until other people tell you're good, you kind of don't believe it. It's just like a mentality thing. And probably when this is going to sound funny, when I was in college, my sophomore year is when I'm like, hey, this might be a real thing here.
For sure. And why did you choose catcher? I think you may have mentioned that already.
It's actually a crazy story. I had a high school coach who was very tough, and he was a legend high school coach. I'd be shocked if he's not in the Hall of Fame. His name's Scott Benedict. He's no longer coaching. He was at Wellington High School. And this was tough love. He was a tough love high school coach. To this day, I'm scared of one person in this world. It's Scott Benedict. And he called me out of math class my sophomore year of high school. I was a second baseman all my life. And called me out of math class. I went to his office. I was so scared. I was 5'2", short and fat. Haven't hit puberty yet. And it was – I don't know if I've ever been this scared. Going to a coach's office, and I just went into his office and I go, hey coach, and he's just like, Brian, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You're too fat and slow to play second base at the next level. From here on out, you're a catcher. Go back to class. And it just like waterworks, right? Like immediately you're hiding the tears, but you're crying like internally. And as I start walking out to add a little salt to the wound, he goes, oh, one more thing. You can use missing a lunch or two. So instead of going to lunch, I'll meet you at the field and learn how to block. And crazy story, because 9 months later, I was getting recruited by nobody then. 9 months later, I committed to go to the University of Florida.
That's crazy. So
insane.
Yeah. So many people recognize you from your career at UF, as you just mentioned. SEC All Freshman in 2004. You went to the USA Baseball National Team at 2005. Just talk about your college career and some of your favorite memories there at UF.
I think everything starts with the foundation, right? And what I mean by the foundation is I had great coaches. And, it's like kind of something that I've been so fortunate throughout my life is the foundation of a great family. And then having a very tough high school coach to going to college and having coaches that I am still in very close contact today. That's how impactful they are in my life. And, it was an amazing experience. When you go to college, and this is stuff even me as a coach today, you don't forget, is the fear when you go there as a freshman. And, when you're coming out of high school and if you're signed to go to D1, and you're in high school, you're probably the best player by far on your team, probably the best player in your area. Then you go to college, and everyone was the best player on their team. Everyone was the best player in their area. And it's a really big wake-up call. It makes people and it breaks people. Some people have never faced that adversity before. And I was so fortunate. I had an older brother who was always better than me. And, my brother were on the same line of work that we are now. And he played at Auburn when I was at Florida. And so I was always kind of used to not being the guy because people were the best player in the team in high school. I wasn't the best player in my family, so I had to really adjust, but I kind of had a heads up and a head start on how to deal with that adversity from having an older brother. And college you face a lot of adversity early on, the toughest competition you're ever going to face. And it was the greatest experience of my life. And it kind of, outside of my family, it was probably the biggest impact to me as a person was college and the coaches and the players that I was surrounded by. And it's funny, I still talk to my teammates. I talked to one of them today, and we're all still involved in baseball. It's such a small baseball circle. And but it was so impactful in my life, and I was so fortunate with the people I was around.
Yeah, absolutely. And the hard work paid off at the University of Florida, because ultimately you were selected by the Toronto Blue Jays in the 6th round of the MLB draft. Just what do you remember the most from that night or that day when you found out you were drafted by Toronto, and just what immediately came after?
It was a tough experience. I was, truthfully, and this is me being completely straightforward, I was expecting to go like earlier. Mm-hmm. And I think there's only one person happy in the draft. This is as true as it gets. One person is the first pick, because the second pick thinks it's not fair because he thought he should have been the first pick. So like the only person that's really happy, and this sounds terrible because some people just want to get drafted. Yeah. And so that's where it really probably makes me sound bad. But when the Blue Jays drafted me, I was really in shock. And the money system back then was broken up differently than it is today, slot-wise, with each round. And so a lot of teams called me up after the second round like, hey, we are going to take you after the 10th round. And back in those days, after the 10th round, you can sign for as much as you want. But those 10 rounds, it was slot money. And out of nowhere in the 6th round, the Blue Jays just took me. And I remember I was golfing at the time with one of my teammates, who's now a cross-checker with the Angels. He was the gentleman I was on the phone with earlier. We were talking about recruiting. And I just got a phone call saying he just got drafted by the Blue Jays. And I was in shock because when I had my meeting, a scout meeting with the Blue Jays, the scout that drafted me was a gentleman by the name of, and I'm so close to this guy, Joel Graham-Petrie. And Joel called me up, and we sat down for a meeting in our scout meeting pre-draft. And he just said, Brian, we don't have a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. We're not going to be able to get you. I'd love to have you, but it just doesn't look good. But I want to meet you. I want to talk with you. So it was pretty much like cross the Blue Jays off the list. And then sure enough, 6th round comes, and there they popped me. And we got everything worked out contract-wise. And when my agent said it was time to play, I just put it all in my agent's hands. And I'm just like, just let me know. I just want to play baseball. When you tell me it's time to go, I'll go. And but it was like, it's a great experience. But people always think of that weird thing. There's only one happy person in the draft, and is the first pick of the draft.
That began a very hectic time in your life, Brian. Solid stats in the minor leagues, but unfortunately just never got the opportunity to play in an actual MLB game. But through it all, just what did you take away the most from your time at that professional level?
Mine's a crazy story because I made it to the big leagues. When I did get called up, and there are some players that, and you'll never see me talk about this. Some of the best players I've ever seen in the world never made it to the big leagues. They just got the injury bug. And the best pitcher I've ever faced, nobody knows who he is because he blew out the next year. And so it's one of those things where I just got the injury bug. And it's nothing. Everyone's got a story on why this happened or that happened. But I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. And through my injuries helped develop me to learn how to be smarter in the game and to really understand, because when I had hip surgery, I had a hip surgery in 2009. And from that moment forward, a pre-hip surgery, I was good. And when I would play, people would watch me play. And I remember this is like, I was a wow guy. You'd see me do something you just didn't see every day as a catch and throw catcher. And so when you see like a really quick transfer thrown out guys and a good catcher, you're like, wow. Post hip surgery, I was like, oh, he's good. I wasn't a wow. And I noticed that. So I really had to make myself still become extremely valuable in a different way, because it's a pure business side. And I had to get smarter in the game, and I had to make myself useful in different areas where I could get away with before. And it was probably the best thing that happened to me, because your baseball career is going to be X time. Yeah. But, I was going to stay in baseball. It's all I know in my life. But catching guys like Roy Halladay and learning from Doc, and, it's just, I've learned more in 2 weeks from Roy Halladay, just talking game calling and reading swings, than I did probably in my 11 years. So it's it's interesting, but those difficult years can be the most fruitful years as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a unique story, my professional career, but nothing I would change at all.
Yeah. Talk about the minor leagues in general. For the casual baseball fan, you either watch Collegiate or MLB. It's not the side of baseball that you usually are too familiar with. What are some stories you have from the minor leagues and some info that you think about how it all works that the average fan might not know?
That's actually a phenomenal question. It's a business.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember correctly, and my numbers might be off slightly with this, is my draft year, we signed over 30 players. It was back when there was 50 rounds in the draft. We signed over 30 players. And if I remember correctly, after 2 years, 3 of us were left. If you just think about, like, this is a business. It's a what have you done for me lately business. You can't struggle. No one's going to feel bad for you. You got to go to work every day, period. So, like, the most difficult thing and the most truthful thing I could say about professional baseball is if you, and I remember talking about this years ago on something similar to this in the podcast, and it was, they go, what's minor leagues like? I go, it's tough because if you win every game, and you're in AA or AAA, and you win every game, and you hit 200, but you won every game, you're probably getting released.
Yeah.
If you lose every game and you hit over 300, you're probably getting promoted.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, it's a really hard for people to get their heads around. This is development. It's all about getting you ready for the big leagues. And it is not about wins and losses, but all of our life we've been taught about winning and losing. It's all winning and losing. And now it's becomes a little different because your outcome does matter. So when you're on good teams and your team's winning, it's such a great environment because now you're making your coach happy and, they want to get to the big leagues too. It's really difficult. That's the business side of it. And you could have been the best teammate ever. You helped in every way possible, but you hit 200, your career's over. So it's difficult. It's very, very difficult. But that's the most enlightening or eye-opening part of professional baseball. The conditions have changed a lot in the last few years because of the new rules they put in place with pay and travel. Changed in a great way. And I'm so happy for those guys. It was a little bit more difficult back then because the pay was so minimal. The travel wasn't the same. We would play 28 straight days. And if you're catching and you're catching 5 out of every 6, on your off day, you're probably traveling. So it's not really an off day. And, but it's difficult, but it's a grind and you're getting paid to play a game of baseball. I mean, what's a better job than that?
True.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you because you did reach the AAA level, and that's usually when guys are right there. Sometimes you have veterans who maybe aren't as good as they used to be, so the clubhouse can be a little bit tough to handle sometimes. Just talk about that because you're either on the brink of making your debut, or you're a guy who unfortunately was either sent down and isn't in the greatest mood, knowing that he was at the majors, now is back. So it's definitely a tougher situation to handle, at least in AAA, I would say, than most other.
It's weird. Like AA and AAA are the same. You can get called up from AA and AAA. The difference is in AAA, you got, just like you said, you got guys that were once in the big leagues. They're not the same. Things have started to slow down a little bit, ended their career or something like that, and or had an injury, haven't really bounced back. Seasoned guys, but they're really smart. They are smart. If there's a hole in your swing, you got a problem as a hitter. Because these are the guys, they know what they're doing. Their stuff might not be as good, but they are really smart. Chris Young is the GM for the Texas Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
And CY called him really high IQ guy. The studying reminded me a lot mentality-wise of preparation as a Roy Halladay. And you're talking about a guy that can read a swing. I mean, he was throwing 84 to 86 when I had him in AAA and breaking more bats than anyone I've ever played with, throwing 84. So it's that's a big difference. And there's some salty guys that are pissed off. And you just learn to deal with them. You learn to deal with them. They're part of your team. They're still part of your family. And if you're going to be spending that much time with somebody, you got to get along with them, so you just got to find a way to deal with them. But you just look in the best in people. And it's the same part as coaching. You look for the best in people. And then AA, it's different. AA is you have elite talent. You have your young Noah Syndergaards, guys throwing 100, Ronaldo Lopez, guys throwing 100, elite stuff, but they're not smart yet. So like a guy, you'll throw him a fastball middle in or in, and a guy will hit a ball 450 feet. And the next time up, you're like, the pitcher will be like, I want to throw it again. I don't think he can do it again. They don't have that. They still have that ego a little bit. And they don't have the smarts like they do in AAA. So it's kind of a pick your poison of, do you want smarts or do you want stuff? And if you catch stuff on the wrong day, you're in trouble. But smarts is smarts. And it's a pick your poison. So it's a big difference between the two, but they're very similar in a different way. So
talk about the point you had mentioned to us that, you wanted to stay in baseball. So maybe coaching was something that you were already looking at even earlier than many would have thought. What point did you think, okay, I want to stay in the game and I want to be a coach?
I always knew I was just going to stay in the game. It was just a matter of which avenue of the game. I made a deal with my mom when I signed professionally that I was going to finish my degree. And so we had a certain age that I had to finish my degree by, because I was only at Florida for 3 years when I got drafted. It was probably the smartest thing I ever did. It was make that agreement with my mom. When you make a deal with your mom, you better keep that agreement. Right? Yeah. So that's a big deal. But it was funny. And so when I got done, I had a little bit of time to think about what I was going to do when I got done playing. And, I ended up helping out when I was finishing my degree at a junior college. They just keep my mind in the game. And it's funny how the moments in your life where you think are like, why am I doing this, end up being the most beneficial for you. And coaching at St. John's River State College, the head coach there was a guy named Ross Jones, who I deeply love. He was my pitching coach at UF. And it was so great for me, finished my degree there in coaching. And that's when I knew I kind of wanted to stay in coaching. But I've always been intrigued by stuff I don't know. I've never been a real coach before. And you learn so much. And when you're used to playing in AA and AAA your whole career, your whole life, and then you go to a junior college, it's like a complete wake-up call. If you're in those levels, you can look at a guy and you already know what you're talking about without saying a word. I could look at a pitcher in the dugout and just be like, hey, we got Rizzo, Ellsbury, and these guys coming up, and we're already thinking the game. We're talking about what we're going to try to do. Then you get to junior college and you're like, hey, we got 2, 3, 4 coming up. And they're like, oh, is the 2-hole, is he the righty or the lefty? It's just like no idea. And it's so frustrating as a coach because you're so used to being around people that are just so locked in. And it was the best thing that I did because it taught me, this might sound bad, and I don't mean this to sound bad. I had to learn to dumb it down. And I had to learn how to break down things and not expect anyone to know what I'm talking about. So it was so beneficial for me because I was so fortunate to do what I did as a player, but now I had to teach how to explain it. The stuff that was just so human nature to us. Now it's how do I break this down so other people understand it? So it really worked out for me. And that's when I got a taste of, I know I want to stay in the game. This might be an avenue I want to stay in.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm very happy you mentioned St. John's River State College as your first opportunity, but USF was that big turning point from 2018 to 19 as an assistant. It may have been brief, but you helped guide multiple players. Joe Genord, Nelson Alvarez, Alec Wisely drafted into the majors. Talk about the success you were able to produce at Tampa on such short notice.
That was a great experience. And that took a lot of convincing for me to go there. My brother was the assistant coach, and me and my brother, it was so funny is the head coach at that time was a guy by the name of Billy Mole. And unfortunately he got let go last year. And Billy and another assistant coach named Chris Cates wanted me to take the catching job and become the volunteer there. And they had to convince my brother. And my brother at first was like, no. And it wasn't because of that. It's like, that's your brother. And technically, it's a unique situation when your brother's your boss. So you don't want to cause any issues in the family, right? Because not only is it my older brother, it's my boss now because he's the recruiting coordinator. And so it took some convincing. It was a great experience. It got me on the Division I side. It got me to see what the talent was like and the preparation needed for the Division I level, and what like ECU does to prepare for games with Cliffy, and all these other guys, what they do and how they prepare. I love studying how other people do things. It's just the catcher in me of what makes this team work. And when you see successful teams, there's usually a recipe on how it got there. And so I love studying that side of the game. And so I loved working with my brother. I loved coaching at USF. It was a great experience for me. And but it was the studying and the more data that was there, the more video for me. It was like I was back playing. When you're a player, you go in early. People think it's the 7 p.m. game. They probably got there at 4. Call up any one of my former teammates. I was there at 10 a.m. studying for that game. So 7 p.m. game, you're there 9 hours before the game starts studying. And that's what I felt like, again, at USF, was the studying. And so it was a great experience for those reasons.
Things took a turn when you became a scout all of a sudden for the New York Yankees in the South Florida area. Talk about how that came to be and what exactly were some of your responsibilities as a scout for one of, actually, I'd say baseball's most prestigious franchise.
No, you can definitely say that. That was one of the greatest experiences I've ever done. And it was unbelievable. I always had a beard like this, kind of like the small beard, where I try to make it, the more I cover my face, the better I look. So I try to cover it up as much as I can, obviously. But no, I just left USF. I was helping out. I had old friends that were at Hillsborough Community College, the old coaches there. And they just called me up like, hey, do you want to come help us out with our catchers? We'd love you to help us out with our catchers. So I would go over there in my own time and kind of help them out with their catchers. And while I'm there, I get somebody that comes and just bumps into me, and well-known scout with Mariners, been there for a very long time. And he just goes, hey, heard you're helping these guys out. That's awesome. You ever thought about scouting? And I go, you know what? And I'm being so truthful when I say this. And I said, I've never thought about scouting, period. When I was a player, I didn't really love scouts, just because you always feel like they're trying to get your dirt. They're always looking for the negative, right? And he was telling me, he's like, Brian, I think you'd really love it. He goes, I really do. And I told him, I've always been intrigued by stuff I don't know. And that's what's really intrigued me in this game, is if I don't know something in the game of baseball, I have to study it. It's weird. Like, even when analytics came, I got to study this. And so I've been intrigued by stuff I don't know. And he just goes, there's an opening with the Yankees. He goes, do you mind if I put your name in? And I'm like, I'll listen and kind of see where it goes from there. But I can't promise this, just because when I was a player, I hated scouts just because they're always looking for negative.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I get a phone call the next day from Brian Barber. And Brian Barber is now the scouting director of the Philadelphia Phillies, who's done a great job there with the Phillies. And he goes, would you like to come in? Would this intrigue you? And I go, yeah, I'm definitely intrigued. It's the Yankees. This is I never played for them. I played against them. They were always really good. And I remember going in there, and the day before I went in there, I had this beard. And I'm just like, this isn't the Yankee way. I know the Yankees. I played against them all my life, and or my whole professional career. But watching them all my life, everyone's clean cut, clean shaven. It's a rule. And I'll never forget. I went in there and I cleaned up. I clean shaven completely, and I walked in, and I had a 4-hour interview with all the different areas of the Yankees. And when you interview with the Yankees, you know why the Yankees are the Yankees. It is precise, it is organized, it is communication. They'll push your buttons in a way to see if you're going to bulk. Can they get you to change your mind, or are you strong behind what you're thinking? Are you direct? And it was an amazing experience, and I had a phenomenal boss. The boss that I had was the guy by the name of Damon Oppenheimer. He's a scouting director. He's the longest tenured scouting director in the history of baseball. Wow. And he could break down the game. He actually was Randy Johnson's catcher in college. So like he's how connected he is. But he's also the vice president of the Yankees. But is someone I always look up to, and very direct. And I learned so much that I did not know from being a scout. And it's prepared me for where I'm at right now. And if I didn't become a scout before doing this, there's no way we'd be like, I don't think we'd be getting the players we're getting right now. And I learned so much from the Yankees, especially from Damon Oppenheimer.
You run into a lot of players, I'm sure, when you're scouting, especially down here in South Florida. Just talk about maybe some stories of maybe a guy that you saw and maybe now the whole world knows about him, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you bump in, especially in Florida, there's so many great players like Andrew Painters. Painter's a top prospect for the Phillies. Roman Anthony's the number one prospect for the Red Sox right now. Is out of Stoneman Douglas. Painter out of Calvary Christian. And you bump into all of them, but at the same time, it's like there's some that you just like you pound your fist down. You're like, this is the guy.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to do that because you're talking to the most powerful people in baseball, and you're pounding your fist. And I mean, there's so many gifted players. I remember being in an FIU game when they were playing Miami of Ohio, and they were facing a pitcher named Sam Bachman. And Sam Bachman was top 10 pick of the draft for the Angels. Well, I'll put it this way. If I was catching Sam at that time in AAA, I'd be thrilled to catch him. And if I was facing him, I'd be pissed because he was that good. And you just see stuff like that you remember. I remember Patrick Pridgeon, Justin Farmer. You remember a lot of these really, Logan Allen especially, had a lot of talks with Logan Allen. And but it's hard to pick out like one experience scouting, but it's amazing how many doors opened for me when they found out I worked for the Yankees. Like I'll be on the phone with somebody and I'll have a buddy of mine next to me who used to be with the Reds, and we'll call a player and same player, and they'll just be like, hey, how you doing? This is so-and-so Cincinnati Reds. He'd be like, hey, what's up? How you doing? And then all of a sudden I would call him and I'm like, hey, how you doing? This is Brian Jeroloman, New York Yankees. Hey, sir, how are you doing, sir? Just because of that name. And so I had to get a little bit used to the change of that when going from the Yankees and now you're at FIU and you're like, hey, how you doing? This is FIU. What happens to me a lot is I will call people and be like, hey, how you doing? This is Brian Jeroloman from FIU. And they'll be like, oh, I saw Jeroloman. I thought it was the University of Florida because my brother's there. Yeah. So I get that sometimes, and I'm like, yeah, we're not going to get this guy. He's already set on UF and that kind of way. But so you get some unique stories like that. But it was an unbelievable experience. And what I learned from scouting, like, slow down. As a player, the biggest thing is when you're getting better is when the game slows down on you. And as a scout, when you go out evaluating, when you learn how to evaluate, it's how you can slow this game down of evaluating players. And instead of watching 4 rounds of BP, you're breaking down BP. You're looking for round 1, round 2. Before that, I just watch a BP before I became a scout and be like, this guy hit like 3 homers. He had a little bit of power, but it's not like in depth. It was a blessing for me to do this. And I tell people this all the time. If I become a head coach one day, one of the coaches will be a former scout, period. Not even close.
Talk about, you mentioned about, pounding their fists to get this one guy. Who's that one guy that you may have done it for before that, the Yankees ended up drafting maybe?
One guy that I kind of went against the grain a little bit was a player out of Westminster named Sal Stewart. Sal Stewart was in our board going into his spring of his senior year, was like a 3rd rounder. And it was like a 3rd to 5th rounder. That was the projection. But I didn't see him play at all in the fall because he didn't play in certain tournaments that I was covering. Like, then he was shut down for a little while. So I never got to see him. And then I go out and see him play. And it was probably the most, at that point of scouting, one of the most ballsy things I've done, or I guess you could say gutsy things I've done, was I saw him play. I saw his BP. I saw the way he fielded, his arm strength. I knew he could stay on the left side of the dirt. Like, he did his load. When you watch him set up and his load, like, this reminds you, not as a hitter, it doesn't remind you of Miguel Cabrera, but the load. reminds you of Miguel Cabrera. And I'm just watching this guy, and like good players, you just tend to fall in love with. And when you write a report on them, the words flow. And then you get like an average player, even like a fourth rounder who's a great player, sixth rounder is a great player. The words don't flow. You're trying to force words in there of how to write this, but when you have a really good player, the words just flow when you're writing a report on a guy. And that was me with Sal, and Sal, at the end of the day, I put him in there as a first rounder. Within 45 minutes of me sitting in the report, I went against what every other scout with us was saying. Every other scout said third rounder. And then here's this guy with a few years, puts him in there, boom, first round. So I get a phone call from my boss right away within 45 minutes. And he's just like, Sal Stewart, first round. Are you kidding me? He's like, you really think he's a first rounder? I go, yes, he is. He's a first rounder. There's no question. He's like, so if I hop on a plane and I change my schedule for the next week, I'm going to go there and see a freaking first rounder. I go, that's what you're going to see. So you're telling me that if every other report's wrong, but yours is right, I go 100%. It's just like, so if you're wrong, you're willing to deal with consequences? Without question. All right, where's he going to play, Brian? Like, is he going to stay at third? You really think he stays at third? I think he moves to first. I go, where's he going to play? He's going to play third in the lineup. That's where he's going to play. He's like, what do you mean? I go, he's going to bat third his entire career. And he's just like, but what about position? He's going to bat third. It doesn't matter. He's like, he's going to play it. You know what I'm saying? It was one of those, like, you just, that's where you're just standing your ground. And everyone flew down a week later. He was playing a player named Jason Torres, who used to be at the University of Miami. And Jason Torres was the highly touted third baseman, I think, at a Miami Springs or Miami Senior or something like that. And when they went down there and saw him after the game, my bosses just looked at me and goes, he's an effing first rounder. And he got up and walked away. And sure enough, Sal Stewart won the first round with the Reds. So it was a unique situation. But that was like the first time you're talking to your boss and you're like, I'm telling you, yes. But yeah, I fell in love with Sal Stewart. Family, I fell in love with, like, his sister was studying psychology. You remember all these amazing things about players you fall in love with. And Sal Stewart was special for me. It's easy to write a report on Painter. He's 6'7", throws 97, high school, phenomenal. Like, does nothing wrong. Like, this is what you think Justin Verlander would look like at this age. Like, this kid's going to be amazing. That's easy. Sal Stewart was tough because you're going against what other people are saying.
All right, so moving on, you go from the Yankees to FIU. Talk to us about that transition when Rich Whitten reached out to you, and you said being with the Yankees were some of the best years of your life. Yeah. What was that, leaving that and joining FIU?
Oh, it wasn't as easy as you think. I really did love working for the Yankees. Period. It was a truly amazing experience. You still miss the field. When the FIU job became open, I know Merv Melendez, Willie Colazzo, the former pitch coach, I caught him in professional baseball. So there's a lot of ties there, and it's, this game can be really difficult, but I didn't put in for the job. I always knew I wanted to go back into coaching over time, but I really loved what I was doing and what I was learning with the Yankees. I got a phone call from the former assistant coach at FAU. And the former assistant coach at FAU became a head coach up in the Northeast. And he just gave me a call and he just said, hey, there's an assistant job at FAU. And I know you know John McCormick really well. I've known John since I was in high school. I grew up out here in West Palm. And he goes, you're the only recommendation I gave. He goes, Brian, I think you would dominate this. And I go, no, I really do miss the field. And he's like, John's going to call you. Will you take the call? So I talked to John, and we talked for 45 minutes. And I've known John for so long. It just financially, it wasn't going to get there. And especially loving what you're doing and then doing that, financially, we weren't going to be able to meet somewhere. And so 2 weeks later, I'm up in Atlanta, and I get another phone call from the former assistant coach at FAU. And he's like, hey, FIU became open, and I just got a phone call from their new head coach named Rich Whitten, and he asked me, anyone you recommend? And he just goes, he told me this later on. I found out it was true from Rich, so I got to thank him very much. But he just goes, I'd hire Brian Jeroloman with no interview. He goes, you got to hire him. And so I never put in for the job. I was up in Atlanta, and Rich happened to be up in Atlanta as well. And he just goes, you want to meet for a cup of coffee? And I met with Rich for a cup of coffee for an hour, and we just talked baseball. And then it was probably like 3-4 hours later, he called me up and offered me the job. And it was crazy. He called up my former boss of the Yankees before we met, and to get permission to talk with me. And that takes a lot of courage to do that. But that's how it kind of all unfolded. And I knew we were going to have a real hill to climb because, I scouted FIU a lot of times, and I knew the team wasn't where you would want it to be, athletically and talent-wise. So, normally as a scout, nothing against Merv or Willie or any of the former coaches, when you're going to FIU outside of Logan Allen, you weren't really going there to see FIU. You were there to see the team probably playing against FIU and one of their pitchers and stuff like that. So you knew there's a lot of room that we had to grow, but I was thrilled. I was really happy. And my girlfriend has 2 kids, and she's absolutely amazing. And no question, I want to spend the rest of my life with her. That guaranteed me staying here. If I got the promotions within the Yankees, I'd probably have to move. And so that guaranteed me staying here. So it was good for me personally and professionally.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Kevin, is it time for a quick look around FIU athletics?
Let's do it.
All righty, then let's take a look around FIU athletics. Who to watch for in the 305. So let's look at some upcoming games for the Panthers, starting off with men's basketball. They're going to be coming back from a road trip following a contest against Kennesaw State. That's going to be on Saturday, February the 1st at 5 p.m. They're going to head back home for a 2-game homestand against both Sam Houston and Louisiana Tech starting on Thursday, February the 6th at 7, and then Saturday, February the 8th at 2 o'clock. And then women's basketball, it's vice versa. They're going to finish off a homestand against Kennesaw State on February the 1st at 1 o'clock. Then head for a 2-game road trip against Sam Houston and Louisiana Tech on Thursday, this February the 6th at 7:30, and then Saturday, February the 8th, also at 2 o'clock. Up next is FIU Swim and Dive. They're going to be taking on FAU on Senior Day on Saturday, February the 1st at 10 o'clock over at the Biscayne Bay campus. They're then going to head over to the University of Miami and Coral Gables for the first chance meet. That's on Friday, February the 14th. And then they're going to get ready for the AAC tournament matches. So best of luck to FIU Swim and Dive as they get ready for that. And, of course, I'd be remiss not to mention baseball and softball, whose seasons are both starting to gear up as we get closer and closer. For baseball, they're going to begin on Friday, February the 14th. That's against Stonehill right here in the 305. Game 1 is at 6:30. Game 2 is the day after at 5 o'clock. Game 3 is on Sunday at 2. And then the final game of the series is on Monday, February the 17th at noon. And then softball will open up their season with the iconic Felsberg Invitational starting against the Indiana Hoosiers on Thursday, February the 6th at 5:30 before taking on Iowa State the day after, also at 5:30, and then wrapping up their Invitational against Stony Brook on Saturday, February the 8th at 12:30 p.m. So that was your quick look around FIU athletics. So talk a bit about your first season here at FIU, Brian. 16-34 record that season might not be indicative of some of the performers that team had, such as Alex Sanchez, Mike Rosario, Ryan Guida in his first year with the Panthers. Talk about that team and the challenges that you had to come up against because of all the players that were not yours and from Merv.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting. The biggest thing is different in this generation than it has been in the past is nowadays, right when you first have a meeting and you're a coach, where back in my day, the players were they treat elders differently. Mm-hmm. The people in charge, the way I talk to my dad is different. It's old school. It's yes, sir, no, sir. And, stuff like that, where back then I used to have to earn the coach's respect. Nowadays, when you become new, you have to earn their respect. Yep. And you have to develop that communication. So like that was the biggest thing at the beginning of just earning their trust, earning their respect. And you have to make them know that you truly care about them, because it's a crazy experience. These are not the coaches they signed with. And it might not be guys that I recruited, but it's also, if you think of the uncomfort it is for them, like we didn't show them around. They didn't get to hear our voices. Now their whole life changed too. And so the biggest thing was like learning, like we had to earn their respect and have to know they can trust us. And that takes time. And, we just weren't talent-wise where we'd want to be. We had good pieces, no question. Like we got really lucky with Michael Rosario, the year he had, and, him developing into a great leadoff hitter for us over time. And, we had Steven Ondina was a good little shortstop. It was a defensive first guy, not a lot of impact with the bat, but he could really kind of pick it at short. And Alex Sanchez was just Alex Sanchez. What a great player. But the one thing I can walk away is, the teammates, they were good people. They came to work every single day. That was never a question. So that's the biggest thing I walk away from that is it was going to be an uphill climb for us, but it was an enjoyable year because of the way the kids handled it. They handled it so well. Adrian Figueroa. I mean, Ronnie Medina was a catcher, learned how to catch when he got there. So like that was a great experience. And you just remember stuff. And those are going to be relationships. I still talk to all of those guys regularly. Michael Rosario was texting me 2-3 days ago. And so like you remember that. And the whole time you're there, when you go as an evaluator, you're looking at your guys and it's like, all right, where do we go from here? What pieces do we have? Where do I go recruit? Like, what's the missing pieces here to develop, break this down to become a really good team. And it was a lot of evaluating on my end when it came to what do we currently have and what do we need in the future. But that was first year. I know it's a long answer, but that was the first year.
That's perfect.
Yeah, and the amount of talent that FIU had last season was indicative of obviously a much better record and a spot in the CUSA tournament. It was historic for the program, a .293, highest batting average since 2011, 3 hitters, made the CUSA all-conference team. Just talk about how special that group was and your part in making all that happen.
I remember signing those guys, I remember going out and seeing Keyshawn for the first time and Brylan for the first time. And I'm a little bit different. It doesn't mean I'm right. I'm a little bit different when it comes as a recruiting coordinator, just because normally, and you just remember when you're a player in high school, you remember the conversations that really impacted you and the ones you really enjoyed as a high school kid getting recruited. And you remember the ones you didn't like. And so like when I go see a player, I won't call them. A lot of coaches do this is they'll call them and I'll kind of be like, hey, Kevin, I know you're playing against, Polk State tomorrow, dude. I can't wait to see you play. This is Brian Jeroloman from FIU. Can't wait to see you play. And that's good. You just introduce yourself, but that's brutal because if I go out there and I didn't like what I saw, and then you're going to be after the game, you're going to be really upset with yourself if you didn't perform. That's one. And the second thing is it's kind of like maybe a girlfriend or something like that where they're just staring at the phone all the time, like waiting for the phone call or waiting for anything. And then you just ghost them. Like to me, that's really unfair. I don't want them to know I'm coming. I'm not going to call them, period. And so like with Brylan West, I didn't call him. He didn't know I was going to see him. Keyshawn Brett did not know I was going to see him. And then you see him. And I remember after seeing one game of Brylan, it was the weirdest eval I ever had as a recruiting guy or an evaluator. But I went up to him after the game, and I'm just like, he had a doubleheader that day. He was playing Lake Sumter. And I'm like, Brylan West, my name's Brian Jeroloman, FIU. Dude, you're going to look great in Navy and gold, man. I'm going to do whatever I can to turn you into a Panther. We're going to make this happen right away. I'm not kidding when I say you're going to make an impact for us. I was becoming a seller now. Like, it's not a, hey, let's get to know each other. It is, boom, I want you. You're going to feel that love. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to, hey, let me meet you. And then there's a first date, a second date, a third. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if I want them, they're going to know it. And I just remember certain phone calls in high school that coaches took that path. And I really, to this day, I remember it. And that's the way I treat it. And I remember getting Keyshawn. I remember getting Brylan. you get those pieces and you're starting to see these guys you have signed and these guys you committed. I remember Mark Hirsch is an incoming freshman. I remember getting him and how happy I was and I am that he's on campus now in Cole, Cleveland. And, you see the pieces starting to come together and you're just like, whoa, like, here we go. Like, now we're starting to move. And the way it used to be to the way that it is now is, when we signed Cole, Cleveland, there wasn't a lot of guys at CBU. It's a buddy of mine owns CBU named Addison Maruzak, and not a lot of guys they ever signed to go to CBU pre us getting there. So, like, it's hard to get a kid from CBU up to that point because how you get a player like a Cole Cleveland is you get other people from CBU. They start talking about FIU. They've heard of it before. You know what I'm saying? That word starts moving around. And so people know it and they're excited for that person. But if someone hasn't really heard of FIU because no one signed there before to go to FIU, everyone's just like, oh, that's cool, whatever. So like we had to start getting those kids again and, getting Cole Cleveland helped us move the needle and getting other players of that caliber and that talent. And it was a great experience last year. Great experience going out and evaluating. And I'll tell you what, right now, like I told people when we got here, give us 2 to 3 years, we'll get our guys. Mm-hmm. And this year we're going to have our best year by far. Like last year, like me and Rich, we kill it on offense. Like everything and it's great when you have a head coach as a former hitting coach because like hitters are going to be taken care of, right? And so like when it comes to our hitters, me and Rich, we're going to take care of it. And last year you saw the impact of the hitters. There's a big jump. And I think this year we finally have some good arms coming in. And you're going to see a really good ball club this year, period.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about recruiting, someone like a Brylan and a Keyshawn. Just what was so I think you've told us this before. It's different for each guy. You got to sell something different or you got to convince them in a different way. Just what was it like recruiting someone like a Uloa, a Brylan, a Keyshawn? Just what was so different about those three guys who are going to be the three main returners this season on the offensive side?
No, it's a good question. Everyone's just like you said, everyone's tick different. And it's like when you're a catcher and you go to talk to a pitcher, if you look at like a Steven Strasburg compared to a Max Scherzer, you got to talk to them completely differently. Like Max, if you don't bully Max, he's going to bully you. So like you got to talk to him and you got to be blunt force trauma. And then with Strauss, you got to show him love. It's the same thing with recruiting. It's the same thing. So like with Alex, just look at the background, like former top 5 rounder out of high school, went to a junior college up in like the Midwest, I think. Then came over to Miami-Dade, but military background, the family. He's used to being blunt. He's the guy that with words you can hit him right in the throat. You can one shot to the head instead of 2 to the stomach. Give it to him straightforward. So like with Uloa, be brutally honest. Tell him what everyone's not. And, you got to find a way for him to trust you. And if you're brutally honest with him, you're going to know. So with Alex, it'd be like, listen, at that time he was committed to UF. And he was going to UF as a walk-on. That's my brother. And I remember going to a game, and I'm just like, hey, do you want to be a freaking Panther? You want to come over here, stay at home? Do you want to go up there and try to play at UF? Keyword try. And I'd love to show you around campus. Dude, I think you have a chance of being an absolute monster. But sometimes it's easy to get lost in the shuffle up there. And I love my brother more than, it's my brother. I love him so much. And but at the same time, like, dude, you can make a real impact. You can stay at home here and be a dude for us. I'm not saying you're going to be the dude. You'll have every opportunity to be the dude. And so with him was being very blunt. With Brylan, it's just, show him love. You got to show Brylan some love. Brylan's one of my favorite stories just because his background is unbelievable. He walked on at South Florida State College. He was a walk-on.
Yeah.
And he's earned everything he's gotten. Everything. And just knowing that you help him understand that how hard he's worked. Yeah. And let them know how it's going to pay off for him in the end. And, it's with Keyshawn, it's very similar. It's love. It's, it's not like build up his ego, but it's just like, hey, man, you're the real deal. You're the real. You got a lot of swing and miss right now. That's going to calm down. You got power. Now it's just being a little more consistent. But, dude, you're going to come out here. You're going to help us destroy those DBUs, the FAUs. You're going to help us destroy them. You come here, you have the year that I'm expecting you to have, you're going to be famous. And so, like, it's selling that. So, like, it's very similar talking to pitchers. Know their background, know what gets to them, and you have to know how to communicate with every person differently. And that's where, like, the background check of being a scout helps, of looking at different avenues of how do I connect with that person? What is important to that guy? You know, if a guy has a 2.6 GPA, school's not important to him. So first phone call is probably not going to be, hey, what do you want to study in college? He's not thinking about that. You know, he's thinking about where he wants to hit in the lineup. If a guy has a 3.8, now you're like, hey, what do you think about studying? You know, like, every person's a tick differently.
Yeah, without a doubt. So just looking ahead, talk a bit about the challenges of handling this new look roster. You have a lot of newcomers from both the high school level and the transfer portal, mixed in with some veteran returners. Just what's been on your mindset through it all?
You know, I'm so excited. This is going to be a good year. And
Yeah,
I got to knock on wood here. Hopefully everyone stays healthy. I'm really excited. You know, now it's finally, this is our team. Everyone here, we've signed. Yeah. You know, so now it means a lot. It's nothing against our former players at all. Love them all. Would do anything for them. But, like, the depth we have this year is so much different than last year. If somebody was unfortunately to go down, we're going to be okay. You know, like, where before, if someone went down, we got a big hole, you know, kind of trying to fill in. But, you know, the incoming freshmen I'm really excited about. Our future is really bright. I would say names, but I don't want to leave someone out, and then I'm in a little bit of trouble. But we have tremendous depth almost everywhere across the field. The power numbers should go up. The batting averages should go up. And, you know, it's different when you look at year to year, and I'm coaching third base. Is like our first year, we had a lot of stolen bases. And it's because we needed to steal a lot. We had to have action. We had to create an offense. Last year, we had under 20, where, like, the first year we had like a 60. And it's just, we have so much power now. So if a guy gets on first with 2 outs, we don't need to try to steal to get the run on our second base. We have a power guy up to bat. And so this year it's different just because we have some really good pieces. We have more speed. It's just, which is a great problem to have when you're a coach. It really is just depth. The more difficult I can make it for Witten to create a starting lineup, the better I'm doing at my job, period.
Man, he told us he's going to sleep every night thinking about what type of lineup he's going to have to put up on opening day. So you're doing a pretty good job right now.
I got to keep that going. The more I can keep him up, the better when it comes to stuff.
There you go.
The better.
Hell yeah. All righty, Brian, thanks for spending some time with us, man. Let's get into some fun rapid fire questions here to close up shop, starting with, who in your eyes is the funniest player on this FIU baseball roster?
The funniest player? I'd probably say, you know, man, he's gonna be talking about this. Brylan West.
That's what the consensus.
Yeah, Brylan.
So who's getting the aux and who's not getting the aux?
Who's getting what? I'm so sorry.
The aux cord, and who's not getting the aux? Who's playing the music during batting practice? Who do you want to hear their playlist, and whose playlist do you not want to hear?
Probably none of them. I'll walk by the clubhouse and, like, I remember Keyshawn was just trying to say, like, what kind of walkout music should I play? And I walked in the clubhouse and I put on a song, and he's like, Coach, that's so old. And then I just walked in. I'm like, I'm out of here, you know, whatever. But, like, the song I put on for them was Way Down We Go by, I think it's Kaleo or something like that. Okay. He's like, oh, that's old, Coach. And then I'm like, what do you think I play? And he plays something. It was just like, that's terrible. You can't even hear what they're saying. You know, so it's hard. I would say all of their music.
There you go.
Yeah.
So where is, on campus, your favorite place to grab a bite to eat?
You know, it's not – I will say this much. There's two places. If I'm going somewhere quick, I'm a terrible eater. I eat terrible. Oh. But I work out, and then I'll fast every now and again to kind of cover it. But I'll do, like, Panda Express.
Okay.
Every now and again. But if I have time to kind of leave campus for like 5 minutes, it would be, like something in a chicken, like 3 chefs in a chicken, or 3 chickens in a chef, or so green chicken place, like, let's say it again.
Green chicken?
No, not green chicken. I know a lot of people eat there. It's like 3 chefs and a chicken or something like that. It is a chicken and rice place. It is phenomenal. It's like healthy. It's not bad for you, except for the rice probably. But yeah.
Hey, Panda Express is becoming the consensus answer here
It's
on
the
the
go-to
show.
answer for sure.
If someone said some healthy place, they're in college. They're lying.
So what's your favorite FIU uniform? There's a lot to choose from. So
I'm colorblind. So I always have a tough one. I actually wore the wrong white pants one day. Guys were wearing creams. I wore white. They looked the same to me. If I was the guest one, because I always wear a warm up kind of jacket. That's what I always kind of wear. But I would probably say the pinstripes, just because they're pinstripes.
Of course,
that's probably be my answer.
Name a baseball player, all time, past, present, doesn't matter, that you would love to play a game of catch with.
It's actually a great question. I've been so fortunate. I got to play with and against and even catch some of my heroes. But if I could pick anyone, it would probably be Satchel Paige.
Wow. That's a fire answer.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. So we were talking a little bit about how you have to sell a player. Who is the player on the current roster right now that you've had the toughest time selling the school, thinking like, oh, maybe I'm not going to get this guy, or you had to work a little harder than usual to get this guy on campus?
That's a tough one. I feel like they're all kind of tough, but I know they're not. The hardest one, man, probably Cole Cleveland, because I know everyone else was all in on Cole.
Yeah.
And then a week later, my brother calls me at UF, and he's just like, "You're lucky you're my brother." He goes, "Or else I'd make a lot of phone calls right now for this kid." And it's just like, "Chuck, just remember, you're my brother." And but yeah, Cole was, wow, what an amazing human being, great family, great kid. And he stuck to his commitment because he had plenty of options to choose a different school afterwards.
So he asked this to everyone on the show, athlete, coach, who do you think should be the next FIU baseball player we bring on here? We've had Brylan, we've had Owen, we've had Logan, Keyshawn, I think, at the moment.
Have you had Keyshawn?
Yeah.
You've had Kish? You know what? I'd probably bring on, truthfully, bring on Uloa. It's a great story. He was a top 5 round pick out of the Houston Astros. I scouted him heavily. I knew Alex really well. He was a guy that we even turned in as a 3rd to 5th rounder at a high school. But he's had kind of a unique ride throughout his collegiate career differently than anybody else. And he's matured so quickly that if there's someone that definitely has a lot of good intake on what the college experience is, it would definitely be Alex.
Definitely.
That's awesome to hear. We'll keep that in mind, Brian. Again, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, as we always do with our guests. If you have anything you'd like to say to the fans, to FIU, to anybody, the floor is now yours.
Oh, man. No, this is a great experience. And come on out and watch FIU baseball. We're going to be a really good team this year. Really excited about what we're going to produce down there this year. And, it's one of those things where when you have high expectations, the more people that show up, the better outcome we're going to have. But the one thing I can promise you is the effort and the talent that we're going to produce this year is going to be something pretty special that I don't want anyone to miss.
That's awesome.
All right, and we'll wrap it up there. So, Coach, thank you so much for hopping on. We're super excited to go out there and watch the team. I'll be out there a lot too. So, all righty, we'll wrap it up here. From Jake, Brian, and myself, we'll see you guys all in the next week. Peace out and go Panthers.
Paws Up!